There is a mystery that haunts the imagination of scientists and dreamers all over the world. From the dusty deserts of Mexico to the misty mountains of China, from the sandy shores of Egypt to the harsh plains of Assyria. This is not a legend, not a myth, but something tangible, carved in stone thousands of years ago. We are talking about an object that modern eyes call the Mesopotamian bag, although its true purpose remains the subject of fierce debate. In recent years, thanks to new scanning technologies and reinterpretation of ancient texts, this mysterious artifact has appeared to us in a completely new light. Researchers have discovered patterns in his images that seem impossible to explain by traditional science. The symbols carved into the stone hint at ancient wisdom, hidden rituals, and mysteries that still elude our understanding. This is the moment when humanity rethinks its history and tries to solve the mysteries of ancient civilizations. In the deep cradle of Mesopotamia, where early cities rose from bricks and under the scorching sun, a strange object began to appear again and again on stone reliefs. It was small and simple in shape, but it carried with it an elusive sense of purpose and significance. This mysterious object appeared everywhere on the panels that decorated the walls of palaces, in scenes of rituals and mythological events, in the hands of gods and divine guards. Its shape was recognizable: rounded top, solid base, sturdy handle. Modern researchers have named it the Mesopotamian bag because our modern eyes cannot resist the resemblance to an ordinary travel bag. But for the people who carved it in stone, this item was much more important than a simple container. He was a symbol of power, an instrument of sacred purpose, a link between the mortal world and the realm of the gods. When archaeologists first cleared the dust from the palaces of Assyria, they found long rows of winged figures frozen in stone. These figures stood in a solemn procession, their bodies strong and muscular, their wings spread out in a majestic sweep, their faces carved with dignity and calmness. Each of these figures was holding two objects. In one hand is a shape resembling a pine cone raised towards the sacred tree of life. In the other hand is a mysterious bag, held with reverence and purpose. The message was clear and unambiguous. Even thousands of years later, whatever the meaning of these objects, they touched on something central to the ceremonial life of the ancient world. They were part of a belief system that structured society and gave meaning to everyday existence. Ancient texts and inscriptions helped to uncover a piece of the puzzle. The so-called bag was, in fact, a ritual bucket used in purification rituals. Inside, it was holy water, collected specifically for blessings, protection, and spiritual rebirth. When a priest or divine minister dipped a pine cone in this water and sprinkled it on a person or building, it symbolized purification and the restoration of cosmic order. The Mesopotamians lived in a world where disaster was never far away. Rivers could overflow their banks, destroying crops and settlements. Storms could destroy entire cities. Enemies could invade and bring death and ruin. Purification rites were their way of begging the heavens to keep chaos in check, prevent disaster, and maintain balance between the human world and the world of the gods. The bag-like object was not a decorative ornament. He was functional in the most sacred sense of the word. He played a role in rituals designed to preserve world balance, to maintain harmony between the visible and invisible worlds. The bucket itself was called bandudu, and artists have repeated its shape with remarkable consistency over the centuries, as if this shape were a sacred code passed down from generation to generation. The more scientists studied the subject, the more they recognized the pattern. The noble guards who carried the bucket were called Abkalu, defenders of kings and teachers of early human civilization. Their presence in the bucket scenes suggested that this object was part of an older and deeper tradition dating back to the very origins of religious practice. In some scenes, they surrounded the sacred tree of life, a symbol of growth, wisdom, and the rise of civilization. A bucket and a pine cone formed a ritual sequence. One object held the water of life, the other applied it. In simple terms, it was a rite of passage, a ceremony of permanent creation, a way in which people believed they were participating in the eternal process of creation. Even the material the bucket was made of mattered. Some buckets were depicted with detailed patterns suggesting metal. Others seemed as smooth as a carved tree. They could be made for different ranks or purposes. They could be brought to temples or gardens where kings prayed at dawn, appealing to the gods for blessings and protection. Whatever their specific role, the subject was treated with deep reverence. Its position in the hands of the gods and spirits showed that it was no ordinary vessel. He represented access to the sacred realm, the connection between the human world and the divine world. It is this circumstance that attracts the attention of modern researchers. But the true depth of the mystery is revealed only when we begin to travel the world. Thanks to time and technology, a lot has changed. Scientists and researchers have noticed a striking pattern. The shape of the so-called bag has not remained confined to one civilization. Instead, it appeared in places separated by oceans, mountains, and thousands of years of history. On the ancient stones of the sanctuary on a hill in Turkey, known today as Göbekli Tepe, carved figures from a time older than agriculture itself hold objects with the same neat silhouette. Three rounded shapes sit above a long carved bench, each with a curve like a handle. These carvings were made by people who lived more than 10,000 years ago, people who had not yet formed cities or invented writing. They gathered on this hill to carve animals, pray, and tell stories that their descendants would never write down. And yet, on their sacred pillars, the shape of the Mesopotamian bag appeared in a triple design, as if it had been carefully displayed. Traveling around the world, crossing jungles and valleys, we find another echo of this mystery. In the carvings created by the Olmec civilization in ancient Mesoamerica, a celestial being holds an object with a rounded top and a solid base. It resembles the same silhouette seen in Mesopotamia and Göbekli Tepe. The world of the Olmecs flourished in a completely separate period of time on a remote continent. Their gods were different. Their myths were different. Their landscapes were completely different. And yet the emblem was there, carried with the same quiet dignity. Among the Maya, the creators of majestic temples and star charts, the symbol reappeared in the hands of their deities. It has acquired meanings related to life, breathing, and cosmic order. Once again, the divine figure was holding a small container with a rounded top. The same visual rhythm was repeated for thousands of miles, as if some invisible hand was guiding the artist's hands. Even in ancient Anatolia, on the mountain plains and scattered fortresses, some carvings hinted at similar shapes held by worshippers or carved next to sacred animals. The people who created these works did not speak the languages of the Assyrians or Olmecs. They lived in cultures with completely different rhythms of life, different beliefs, and different ways of seeing the world. And yet the form appeared as if it was guided by some kind of quiet universal intuition, deeply rooted in the human psyche. It is in this recurring visual echo that the mystery becomes more acute. How can a simple form appear with such importance in civilizations that have never touched each other? These societies did not trade with each other. They didn't exchange stories and legends. They did not exchange artisans or priests. They lived oceans apart, without shared maps, without shared alphabets, without shared gods. Yet the same form emerged independently. Scientists, archaeologists, and historians work with fragments of history, trying to make sense of ancient civilizations and their many mysteries. They carefully move through the ruins, tracing the lines carved by the hands of long-dead people. They study tablets printed with ancient words. They compare rituals, objects, myths, and languages. And in their painstaking work, the bag begins to reveal a more measured story rooted in the daily rhythms of early life rather than extraordinary events. For these scientists, the carved figures in the palaces of Assyria and Babylonia are not coded messages or relics of a forgotten science. These are recordings of powerful rituals performed to maintain cosmic order. The bag appears over and over again simply because it was needed in these rituals. She held holy water, used to bless kings, temples, and even fields. Sprinkling this water was considered to wash away spiritual danger. The ritual was called purification. It wasn't dramatic. It was not mysterious to the people who practiced it. It was absolutely necessary. The item carried by the winged guards was a real item known in ancient texts. The stone tablets describe the containers used by the priests in the purification of sacred sites. Some tablets even list the ingredients used in the purification. Water mixtures with aromatic plants, resins, and mineral-rich water collected from certain rivers. When the carvings depict the shape of a pine cone in one hand and a bucket in the other, scientists see a set of ritual tools, not an unknown technology. In this understanding, the bag has nothing to do with energy sources, energy devices, or hidden knowledge. It is a vessel, container, sacred bucket, shaped for convenience and ceremony. It needed a curved handle so that a priest or guardian figure could carry it with ease. He needed a wide opening so that the pine cone dipper could enter it. His design served that purpose. Archaeologists also point out that the sequence of the shape does not imply a mystery. Ritual objects often retain the same shape over the centuries because the shape becomes symbolic. In many religions, the appearance of sacred instruments has been preserved almost exactly over time because tradition holds sway. Once a community decides that a certain form is sacred, it remains unchanged. The bucket held this role in Mesopotamia. His form was not magical. It was just part of a ritual identity, the way people recognized and understood the meaning of a sacred object. But not everyone agrees with this cautious, scientific explanation. Over the years, a small but determined group of alternative thinkers observed how traditional historians guarded their version of the past with strict rules and rigid boundaries. These thinkers believed that too many mysteries were sealed behind neat explanations, as if the past were a museum that allowed no movement. They felt that there was an unwritten agreement to avoid anything that did not conform to the usual pattern, and so their patience began to crumble. Inside this space of growing frustration, Erich von Daniken's voice grew bright, strange, and unforgettable. He entered the conversation like a traveler carrying an idea that sounded almost unbelievable, but still somehow familiar, as if people had been secretly wondering about it all along. His view of the ancient world did not sit neatly on the shelves of history. He believed that many of the old objects were not just symbols of culture, but signs of visitors who came from far away, from beyond the sky. For him, the small carved bags found in remote lands were more than decorations. They were tools carried by beings whom he described as gods who walked among early humans. According to his interpretation, these visitors were not supernatural spirits, but travelers from another world. beings who possessed knowledge far beyond what early humans could understand. He imagined them moving through the ancient world with a quiet purpose, sharing wisdom in ways that shaped early civilizations. In his eyes, the carved bags were like portable toolkits. They could contain devices, seeds of knowledge, objects that controlled energy, or tools that helped these visitors guide humanity's first steps. When traditional historians explain the similarity of the bag shape in civilizations separated by worlds as a common human imagination, von Däniken found this similarity too sharp, too precise, too persistent to ignore. He saw it as a mark left by the same hands, or at least by the same influence, moving quietly through the world in much older times. His ideas traveled fast. They jumped into documentaries, books, conversations, even quiet whispers among people who felt that something was missing in the way the story was taught. And for many listeners, something stirred inside them. They saw the world not as a closed puzzle, but as an open one, full of missing pieces hiding under dust and time. Von Däniken's theory resonated with people for reasons that went far beyond the cutout bag itself. People love theories that stretch them beyond certainty. They like to imagine what might be waiting just beyond the edges of the explanation. The ancient carvings are already mysterious, but when a familiar symbol appears over and over on the continents, it becomes difficult to ignore. People are starting to wonder what happened long before history started taking notes. There is also the simple power of images. Visual repetition feels like a clue, even when logic suggests a different answer. And in the quiet space between what is known and what is unknown, imagination flourishes. Even with careful research, there are many heads of the ancient world who remain silent. Civilizations appeared with sudden brilliance, built wonders that still puzzle experts, then disappeared without leaving enough explanations behind. After a debate between traditional scientists and the restless voices of ancient alien theorists, the mystery of the little stone bag has not been resolved. Instead, it opened up to an even wider landscape of ideas. People from many different schools of thought stepped forward, each holding their own answer, like a lantern lifted into the darkness. None of them completely agreed with the others, but each added something meaningful to the puzzle, as if the ancient bag invited the world to consider every possible doorway into the human imagination. The symbolists were among the first to speak up. They believed that early artists carved shapes not only for decoration. For them, a small bag was not a bag at all. It was a space container, a silent symbol of the universe itself. They imagined it as a sacred vessel that held the essence of life, in a way that ancient people might have imagined the sky as a great dome, or imagined the oceans as the cradle of creation. In their eyes, the bag represented the storehouse of heaven, the mysterious source from which all life flowed. They saw the handle as an arc of the sky, and the body of the bag as the womb of nature. This interpretation painted the small object with bright colors, turning it into a symbol of beginnings, a reminder that ancient minds often described the world through sacred forms instead of words. The perennialist philosophers went further, not to argue, but to suggest another layer. They believed that people all over the world share deep patterns of thinking that spring from a single hidden foundation. For them, the carved bag was an archetype, a shape that appears naturally in the human mind over the centuries and continents. Just as people everywhere draw circles for the sun or triangles for mountains, the shape of the bag could have originated from a common internal language. They believe that people create similar symbols because their minds follow similar paths. Therefore, the similarities between distant civilizations did not need a common contact. He only needed the general structure of human thought. Their gaze was soft and thoughtful, viewing the bag as an echo of something deep in human nature. Agrarian theorists stood firmly on the ground and the soil. They believed that the ancient world was much more practical than mystical. In their eyes, a small bag could contain real seeds. They represented early priests or sacred figures carrying small containers filled with grains, which symbolized the promise of new harvests. It made sense to them because many ancient gods were associated with agriculture, rain, and the renewal of the earth. The seeds were miracles in themselves, tiny objects that slept in the ground until they awakened into forests and food. The bag, they claimed, could be a symbol of this power, linking the gods with the first farmers. Instead of cosmic riddles, they saw the simple truth. People revered what kept them alive, and in those days, nothing mattered more than seeds. Anthropologists have entered with cautious steps, studying the bag not as a magical object, but as part of human culture. They believed that the form represented status or authority, not a tool divided by continents. For them, the bag meant the role of the figure who wore it. Many early societies used special containers to store sacred powders, perfumes, or small ritual objects. These were not ordinary items that people wore every day. They marked someone as a keeper of tradition, as a person chosen for a sacred role. Therefore, even when the bag appeared in different civilizations, it did not prove a common origin. This only proved that many cultures appreciated the act of carrying sacred objects in a distinctive way. Their gaze was calm, rooted, and based on human behavior rather than grand cosmic drama. Psychological theorists looked inside the mind, not out at the world. They believed that the repeating shape of the bag was not a message from ancient gods or a clue from forgotten civilizations, but a reflection of how the human brain works. People naturally look for patterns. They see familiar shapes in the clouds and meaning in the repeating symbols. For these thinkers, the bag was part of the overall cognitive structure, the overall way the mind organizes visual information. When early artists needed to show that someone was holding something important, they used simple geometric shapes. A rounded rectangle with a curved top is a lightweight and natural design for an item designed to look portable. Therefore, the similarities on the continents were not a sign of secret connections. It was a sign of common mental habits, as natural as the way children everywhere tend to draw smiling faces with two eyes and one curved line for a mouth. Through all these explanations, the bag sat in the middle like a quiet stone, unchanged, while the people around it brought their own knowledge, hopes, and ways of thinking. It became a mirror that reflected every approach that people used to understand the past. Some saw the cosmos inside her. Some have seen the human mind. Some have seen the rise of agriculture and survival. Others saw ritual and authority. Each school of thought colored its own story, and together they filled the ancient silence with many voices. And as these voices continued to rise and mingle, they revealed something soft and beautiful. The ancient world still speaks, not through one interpretation, but through many. A small stone bag, carried by figures lost in time, continues to travel through the human imagination, collecting new meanings with each generation, proving that the past does not sleep. It's alive, waiting for us to listen. But there is another important truth that we need to consider. Despite centuries of speculation, there is no evidence that the bag held power beyond the walls of temples or the reach of rituals performed by priests. Archaeologists and historians who have carefully studied the ancient world in detail, almost without question, identify the object as a ritual bucket for purification. known in the language of the time as bandudu. It held the holy water used to purify temples, kings, and sacred sites. After tracing this subject through time, continents, and theories, it becomes clear that the Mesopotamian bag, for all its mystery and appeal, is deeply rooted in the daily lives of the people who carved it. Despite centuries of speculation, there is no evidence that she held power beyond the walls of temples or the reach of rituals performed by priests. Every line carved in stone, every meticulous image of a winged guardian holding a bucket, reflects the importance of ritual in the spiritual life of early Mesopotamia. In its original cultural context, the bag is neither mysterious nor alien. This is usually in the sense that it belonged to a certain tradition. It had a form that served a purpose, a function that the people who used it fully understood. And yet, when modern eyes meet an object, it transforms, separated from its original context and placed alongside similar forms found in other civilizations. It suddenly feels mysterious, even extraordinary. Carvings from Göbekli Tepe, the Olmec world, Maya, and Anatolia show shapes reminiscent of a Mesopotamian bag, suggesting wonder and speculation. The human mind, trained to look for patterns and stories, tends towards explanations that include contact across oceans, shared knowledge, lost stories, or even the intervention of beings beyond the stars. The Mesopotamian bag, small and carefully carved, becomes a canvas on which modern curiosity projects its fascination with the unknown. But careful research and scientific reasoning lead us back to simpler, more plausible explanations. The recurring appearance of similar forms in individual civilizations is most convincingly explained by convergent symbolism. Human societies everywhere face similar challenges, desires, and sacred practices. People need vessels for offerings, containers for ritual substances, and ways to visually communicate authority or sanctity. A small container with a curved handle is an intuitive solution. It's easy to create, easy to recognize, and visually clear. Through separate cultures, the same decision emerges, shaped by practical necessity, ritual function, and cognitive tendencies of the human mind. The repetition of the form does not imply contact or a common origin. Instead, it demonstrates the universality of human thought, the way in which similar circumstances often lead to similar ideas. Transcontinental connections, while tempting the imagination, remain unproven. There is no reliable evidence that ancient civilizations as remote as Mesopotamia, Mesoamerica, or Anatolia shared knowledge through travel or trade that would explain these common forms. Similarly, the idea that extraterrestrial beings used these objects as tools or devices, as dramatic and appealing as it may be, has no archaeological support. There is no material, text, or artifact that directly indicates such a presence. Theories are attractive to the human love of mystery, but they remain stories, not facts. The Mesopotamian bag is unusual only when viewed through modern eyes. In its original world, it was common, functional, and meaningful within the rituals of a deeply spiritual civilization. Its design, repeated over the centuries, served as both a symbol and a tool, embodying the ideas of purification, order, and sacred responsibility. But its echoes in other civilizations remind us of a remarkable truth about humanity. People separated by geography and history can independently come up with forms, symbols, and ideas that seem strikingly similar. We share cognitive structures, aesthetic instincts, and ritual needs that shape the way we create. The little Mesopotamian bag, repeated and reinterpreted in distant lands, becomes evidence of the universality of human imagination and the constant human search for order, meaning, and connection. It is both common and unusual, material and symbolic, a reminder that even the simplest forms can carry layers of history, culture, and thought far beyond their physical form. In the end, the most factual conclusion is quietly simple. A bag is a ritual object of its own culture, a practical tool exalted by ritual and artistic care. Its form, repeated in distant cultures, reflects human creativity and shared cognitive patterns rather than secret journeys, lost knowledge, or extraterrestrial intervention. It's a small object with a long history, common to the people who carved it, unusual to those who see it thousands of years later. It teaches that human beings, regardless of era or land, often independently arrive at symbols that reflect each other, offering a glimpse into the deep threads that intertwine human experience across time and space.